Only a small handful of people are aware of the events in Daggerfall, Morrowind and Oblivion that prove Talos is a divine. For 99% of the population of Tamriel, they're told he's a divine by people in power, but they don't know of the actual proof. So when groups like the Thalmor come along wanting to ban his worship, there really isn't the kind of proof needed to counter their claims, which leads to opposing views and eventual conflict. But what is the truth really? Who is Talos? Who is Tiber Septim? Who is Ysmir? And who is Arctus? On my last video about Ulfric, I had mentioned the nature of Talos being not straightforward, which I felt I needed to expand on, and thus this video. But before we get to it, I would also like to announce that we have surpassed 100 subscribers.
Thank you to Satan for giving me inspiration. Thank you so very much. Much appreciated.
How to understand Talos in simple terms. The Catholic Holy Trinity of the Son, the Father and the Holy Spirit makes up the concept of God. Now replace those three except with Hjalti Earlybeard, Zurin Arctus and Ysmir Wulfharth, three distinct personas sharing one essence. That, in simple terms, is Talos. It gets more complicated with the Arcturian heresy into account, with the simplest explanation being that Ysmir Wulfharth is pretending to be Tiber to make politics easier so that he can act with the full authority of the Emperor on his behalf. Throw in Septim's own propaganda machine that rewrites his own past to make himself appear more glorious, and you get a number of different public images that belong to one man who apparently became a god. Take the enantiomorph into account, and Zurin Arctus, Ysmir Wulfharth and Tiber Septim all become a part of Talos. Talos is still Tiber Septim, but in his accession he absorbed Arctus and Wulfharth in a way the mythic reenactment basically has all three switched roles until you can't tell them apart anymore. But I think Talos is still just Tiber Septim's soul, with merely the imprints of Arctus and Wulfharth. Let's look at this through history and in more detail so we make more sense out of it. The end of Interregnum and the rise of Third Empire. The remnants of the Interregnum's conflict is still raised, with the ambitious lords throughout the land competing for the chance to place themselves on the throne. Among these aspiring leaders, Culhecain, the king of Falkreath, stood out. He had successfully united the contentious Colovian lords, yet securing his northern borders presented a formidable challenge. King Culhecain, however, possessed a hidden asset, a young warrior named Hjalti Earlybeard, who swiftly rose through ranks of Culhecain's army and became his most distinguished general. The Battle of Old Roldan would serve as Hjalti's proving ground, and his remarkable achievements in the Reach would be immortalized in the legend. The initial steps in his journey from being a mere mortal to a ruler and ultimately to godhood occurred amidst a war in the Western Reach. Hjalti's formidable forces, comprised of Colovian soldiers and Nordic berserkers, relentlessly pressed forward against the Reachmen's defenses. This unrelenting assault forced the Reachmen to fall back to their last significant bastion, Old Roldan. Within the safety of their palisaded walls, the Witchmen taunted the attackers, were unaccustomed to such fortification. In this challenging movement, the soldiers turned to their young and resourceful general, Hjalti Earlybeard, for guidance. Although he was a shrewd tactician, the situation appeared grim. A prolonged siege was unfeasible, as his troops could anticipate no supplies or reinforcement from Falkreath, their king who was occupied in the south. Thus, the weight of resolving this dilemma fell squarely upon Hjalti's soldier. One fateful night, Hjalti retired to his tent to contemplate the choices before him. As he delved into deep thoughts, a violent tempest descended upon the camp. Rain lashed at the surrounding and lightning tore through the night sky. Amidst the raging storm, a particular cloud formation descended from the heavens and entered Hjalti's tent. This cloud conversed with a voice that resembled rolling thunder, punctuated by sudden cracks and flashing of lightning. Their discussion continued through the night, and as dawn broke, the storm dissipated, leaving only a tempestuous aura within Hjalti's tent. Emerging from this ethereal encounter, bowing his head, the general presented an awe-inspiring sight. The warriors parted to make way for him, much like leaves yielding to a powerful gust of wind. They formed a procession behind this enigmatic leader, following him towards the gate of Old Roldan. The arrows of the Witchmen proved futile against the swirling tempest that enveloped Hjalti. A moment of tense silence hung in the air as the storm-wild general came to a stop before the formidable oak gates of the stronghold. Then, with a deafening crack of thunder, he unleashed a shout that reverberated through the heavens. With a war cry that seemed to shake the very foundation of the earth, the army surged into Old Roldan, and the defenseless Witchmen made their inevitable demise in a staggering number. The victory was nothing short of resounding. and Hjalti Earlybeard earned himself a new epithet, one that would resonate through the annals of history. He became known as Talos Stormcrown, the Dragon of the North, the Grey Wind, and the Storm of Cain. Rise of Hjalti through the ranks. Word of Hjalti's remarkable exploits spread rapidly through the western lands. Culhecain's political adversaries began to entertain a previously unthinkable notion, forming a coalition to eliminate the most formidable contender for the Ruby Throne. The lesser lords of Colovia and High Rock forged an alliance, leading to a pivotal battle on the Golden Hill of Sancretor. This clash was inarguably the linchpin in Culhecain's inexorable rise. While the opposing armies clashed on the battlefield, General Hjalti embarked on a daring infiltration of the ancient fortress, systematically dismantling its defenses with his formidable powers. When the Nordic leaders bore witness to Hjalti's commanding boast, they promptly defected to his side, viewing him as the true son of Skyrim and the rightful heir to the realms of men, as dictated by their folklore. Hjalti, aware of the power he wielded as the Storm of Cain, captured the remaining Breton leaders who had opposed him, compelling their forces to surrender, and the day belonged to Culhecain. Upon his emergence from the hills of Sancretor, Hjalti proudly bore the long-dormant amulet of kings around his neck. Subsequently, the Battle of Five Bridges unfolded, where with sage counsel from his battlemate Zurin Arctus, Hjalti vanquished an army twice the size of his own. In just 2 years since being acclaimed as the Stormcrown, the Grey Wind had propelled Culhecain all the way to the Imperial City. The Vipernixz battlemates who occupied the capital swiftly surrendered to Culhecain, dreading the wrath of his formidable general. It is at this juncture that the true ruthlessness of Talos Stormcrown comes to the forefront. Where did Talos origin? From the eyes of an average citizen in the world of Tamriel, a figure named Hjalti Earlybeard emerged as a formidable warrior and leader, displaying prowess that defied his years. Yet one must ponder the veracity of a tale where a young general happens upon the legendary voice that fabled power at the precise moment it is required. Some accounts dismissive of the enigma known as Hjalti contend that Talos existed as Talos from the start, plucked from Atmora's icy embrace by the hands of Culhecain. This perspective suggests that Hjalti or Tiber or Talos traced his lineage not to the Bretons but to the proud Nords of the North. Now, the epic saga of Tiber Septim, as meticulously detailed in the inaugural Pocket Guide to Empire, paints a portrait of his birthplace in Atmora, a land once shrouded in legend. It was the ancient Elnofer region, it seems, that bore witness to his arrival. In his youth, he is said to have roamed the frigid expanse of Skyrim, imbibing the sagas of the Tongues, the wisdom of tribal chieftains, and the art of warfare itself. Yet, as the world turned and destiny beckoned, the Greybeards, sequestered in their mountain sanctuary, sensed an unrest that heralded impending storms. Villages emptied in terror, forbidding the cataclysm to come. Talos, guided by his purpose, embarked on a treacherous journey to the heart of Greybeard's domain, where tempestuous winds raged and ancient voices were unsacred. When the venerable sages dared to utter his name, it wasn't mere sound, but seismic force that reverberated through the very earth. The tongues of Skyrim, those who communed with the very essence of the world, prophesied his dominion over Tamriel and beseeched him to look beyond the southern lands where destiny beckoned in earnest. After the tumultuous battle of Old Roldan, Talos embarked on a daring journey into Citadel, all amidst the backdrop of a colossal storm. Nevertheless, this poetic rendition of events tends to oversimplify and conveniently gloss over crucial junctures in his intricate life narrative. Meanwhile, the lingering spectre of Old Roldan patiently awaits the return of Hjalti, the very warrior he once nurtured and mentioned in the distant realm of Orisinum, located within the rugged terrain of High Rock. It is worth noting that narratives chronicling the life and enduring legacy of Talos are often spoiled by the presence of bias. Imperial records, for instance, have crafted an image of him as a prophesied hero, drawing parallels to the like of Alicia and Raymond. Conversely, we encounter an heretical manuscript, presumably the handiwork of his former imperial battle mage Zurin Arctus, which paints a significantly darker and more enigmatic portrayal. Vivec's vision. In the Elder Scrolls universe, the idea of names actually hold power, metaphysical, magical, or otherwise, and the sharing of names between the three figures, Arctus and Hjalti, both being Tiber Septim, Hjalti and Wulfharth, both being Ysmir, and Arctus and Wulfharth, both being the Underking, might actually be related to their oneness through the enantiomorphic structure. It's getting more complicated, I know, but just hold on, it'll make sense. As for where it is discussed, once again we have Vivec to thank for all this nonsense. From the Sermon 19 of 36 Lessons of Vivec states, Vivec then saw the moth that would come from the starry heart, bringing with them dust more horrible than the ash of Red Mountain. He saw the twin head of ruling king, who had no equivalent, and 8 imperfections robbed into precious stones, set into a crown that looked like shackles, which he understood to be the twin crowns of the two-headed king, and a river that fed into the mouth of the two-headed king because he contained multitudes. This passage raises questions and reveals a recurring theme. Queen Alicia combined aspects of Caesar, the god of men, and Auriel, the god of time, to form Arctus, the two-headed king of Cyrodiil known as the Starry Heart. However, this passage also alludes to Talos, a combination of Hjalti and another entity, possibly Zurin Arctus. Vivec foresaw Tiber Septim as a destructive and dominant force in Tamriel, naming him Talos' Stormcrown. Another passage from Sermon 11 states, Orator and Sarmat, 1 and 1, 11 and elegant number, which of the ones is the more important? Could you ever tell if they switched places? I can, and that is why you will need me. This passage, while not direct, seems to be alluding to the enantiomorph, albeit one between Vivec, Nervar and Daggerfall, which I would personally think of more like a failed enantiomorph, one which perhaps Vivec wished to construct in order to hide his betrayal. Ysmir Wulfharth, the Underking, and Hjalti. To understand the whole story surrounding Talos, we also need to understand his Nordic aspect, the Ysmir Wulfharth. The character known as the Underking plays a significant role in Daggerfall, and he is widely believed to be the remnant of the fusion between Zurin Arctus and Ysmir Wulfharth. Wulfharth is an ancient Nordic spirit, often associated with making a pact with Tiber Septim, granting him the ability to wield the voice. And according to the Arcturian heresy, as I stated before, a storm cloud descended upon Hjalti's den before his victory at Old Roldan. It was the ancient Ash King, Ysmir Wulfharth, behind this event, who began as a mortal but later transformed into a returning ashen spirit carrying out Sor's will. And in the 5 songs of King Wulfharth, it is mentioned that his tomb was so powerful that he could not verbally swear into his office, and scribes were used to draw up his oath. During his mortal life, he restored the traditional Nordic pantheon, dismantling the Temple of 8 Divines. In battle, he faced the orcs and banished their chieftain to oblivion. He wielded storm clouds as shield, protecting his armies from destruction, and as such, his legacy blurs the line between myth and reality. When he passed away, legend has it that the flames of his funeral pyre reached Cain's heart. He was reborn from the ashes to challenge the devil of Red Mountain, seeking to reclaim Sor's heart. Yet Vivec reduced him to dust again, and he returned from the ashes again to repel an Akaviri invasion. Afterwards, his spirit wandered the winds for many years. Remember the time when Greybears shook the world with their proclamation of new Dragonborn in Skyrim? Well, according to the Arcturian heresy, a similar roaring or seismic event allegedly awakened the Ash King Wulfharth. However, the Greybears vehemently denied this claim, forcibly reducing him to ash once more. They issued a solemn warning to Wulfharth about the color of betrayal, yet he had already departed, riding the winds once more, in search of a Breton youth destined to govern Tamriel. This is the juncture where the initial 2 facets of Talos converge. Wulfharth, when he materialized in Hjalti's tent as a foreboding cloud, the spirit of Ash King obscuring his visage. Hjalti, with a triumphant shout, breached the walls of Old Roldan and embraced all the titles once attributed to Wulfharth: Ysmir, Dragon of the North, the Grey Wind, and the Storm of Cain. Detailing and inquisiting Culhecain's assassination. King Culhecain had achieved an extraordinary feat of being on the cusp of becoming an emperor, yet that fateful night was spoiled by tragedy, or perhaps it was treachery. Historical accounts would have it believed that Culhecain's Breton adversaries conspired to orchestrate his downfall. It is widely documented that a night blade from the western ridge clandestinely infiltrated the city, assassinating the would-be emperor on the eve of his coronation. The vengeance exacted was thorough, as the night blade not only ended Culhecain's life but also set the imperial palace ablaze and silenced General Talos forever by slitting his throat. The Pocket Guide to the Empire presents a stirring narrative to the aftermath, one that would solidify Talos' heroic ascent to the ultimate title of Cyrodiilic Emperor. Emerging from the smoldering ruins, he stood with one hand on his wounded neck and the crown of Culhecain clutched in the other. The Legion wept at the sight. His northern magic had preserved him, though the voice that once could rout an army with a roar now whispered its commands. Assuming the name of Tiber Septim and Ysmir, the Dragon of the North, he seized the red diamond crown of the Cyrodiils, becoming their true emperor. It is a tale of genuine heroism, one capable of unifying the disparate factions within Tamriel's human provinces. Hailing from High Rock as Hjalti Earlybeard endeared him, albeit reluctantly, to the Bretons. and his status as Dragonborn, chosen by the Greybeards to wield the voice against adversaries, made him deeply admired by the Nords. By defying death and succeeding Culhecain, adopting the name Tiber Septim, he seemed destined to rule the Imperials, weary from 4 centuries of turmoil. This marked the genesis of Talos' triality, one man with 3 facets, an enduring motive in the legend of hero god of mankind. During Arctus, the Imperial battle mage was the one who crowned Tiber Septim in Culhecain's stead. However, some contend that this narrative appears too flawless. An alternate theory regarding Talos' ascent to Ruby Throne reveals a darker side to the beloved Emperor. If we are to entertain the idea that source form was inaccessible to Hjalti, who relied on his symbolic storm crown to channel the voice through Wulfharth, we can uncover the motive behind the grand assassination conspiracy. King Culhecain's tragic demise on the eve of his coronation aligned perfectly with the ambition of Hjalti and Wulfharth. The Greybeards foretold to Talos that he would unite and rule Tamriel. Thanks to Breton Nightblade assassin, Talos became the heir apparent. But what about Talos surviving the assassination attempt with his slit throat? If he had betrayed Culhecain, wouldn't he emerge unharmed? Hjalti knew he couldn't always rely on Wulfharth to perform shouts. If people heard the tale of Talos surviving with a slit throat, he would be celebrated as a hero and have an excuse never to use the voice again. Tiber Septim, arguably the most famous of the Dragonborn emperors, is mentioned using the storm voice at Old Roldan and Sancretor and Little Ills. Unless the Nightblade's sole purpose was to trim Hjalti's early beard, there's no plausible reason for his survival. Perhaps the Nightblade never existed and Talos attributed his own deception to the kingdoms of High Rock. By faking the wound and wearing bandages, Talos could claim the crown without demonstrating the voice mastery again. Tamriel's Conquest by Tiber Septim. Within the realm of Tamriel, whether spoken in cautious whispers or proclaimed with resounding shouts, the undeniable truth emerges. Talos, who goes by various names, wielded effective governance over his empire. His mission throughout the Tiber Wars was singular, to unite all of Tamriel under a single banner. And to give him credit, to some degree he did realize that goal. Black Mars was politically absorbed, though it remained a region inherently resistant to control, with the Argonians rejecting foreign dominion. In contrast, Morrowind never officially surrendered. Wulfharth, resolute in avenging his past defeat by the warrior poet Vivec 2 millennia ago, later land too formidable to be conquered. Instead, both mighty provinces found common grounds through peaceful agreements. The pivotal step in fulfilling Source's will came when Talos embraced the Armitage, which involved subduing the proud Thalmor and instigating an era of human dominance. While Morrowind preserved its custom and religious freedoms, Tiber Septim acquired the new medium. However, this compromise greatly enraged the Ash King, who sought retribution against the tribunal for usurping Source's divinity, that is, the divine power of Heart of Lorkhan. Tiber Septim then ventured across the Abacian Sea and laid siege to Somerset's capital, Alinor. The precise mechanism by which the Emperor overcame Somerset remains sparsely documented, though there are hints that the new medium played a pivotal role in its conquest. Revelations from daggerfall suggest that the new medium served as Tiber Septim's clandestine weapon in his quest for supreme power. Standing at a towering 100 feet, it functioned as an automaton, resembling a golem or an Atronach, and relied on Mantella gem as its power source. This leads us to intriguing story of Hjalti, Talos or Tiber's ultimate and crafty betrayal, surpassing even his own supposed usurpation of the Cyrillic throne in ruthlessness. Kagronach's initial plan for the brass god hinged on a power source of a divine magnitude, the Heart of Lorkhan. While Tiber Septim had assembled the new medium's pieces, he lacked this vital power source, guarded fervently by the Devil of Dagoth. Septim entrusted the task of reconstructing the tower and unraveling ancient secrets to Arctus, the Imperial battle mage, and although Arctus uncovered a trove of hidden knowledge, he worked with incomplete information. According to the Arcturian heresy, a significant misunderstanding occurred. While the Heart of Lorkhan was meant to empower the new medium, Arctus mistakenly believed it required Lorkhan's physical body instead. In the Elder Scrolls lore, certain events carried profound significance. Among them is Convention, the moment when Norn was created and Lorkhan faced divine punishment. Lorkhan's punishment involved Trinimag forcibly removing his heart, which was subsequently taken by Auriel. When Tiber Septim came into possession of the new medium, he entrusted Zurin with the task of activating it. Zurin deduced that a Lorcanic spark could sufficiently emulate the heart and activate the new medium. Tiber Septim orchestrated an ambush for Ysmir Wulfharth. Tiber Septim then orchestrated an ambush for Ysmir Wulfharth with the intent of capturing his soul. This ambush mirrored the events of Convention, during which Zurin expelled Wulfharth's heart, allowing Tiber to acquire the Lorcanic spark known as the Mantella. This event also fulfilled one of Walking Ways or mantling associated with Talos. Suddenly, everything fell into place for him. It became clear that he was destined to command the new medium, setting a crown with Ash King or Ysmir Wulfharth. This was possible due to Wulfharth being an aspect of Lorkhan, a Caesarean, and thus resulted a grand scheme that brought a divide between Hjalti, Ysmir and Arctus, which also paradoxically united them into Talos. Tiber Septim harnessed the power of the Mantella to conquer the Somerset Isle, proclaiming himself emperor and reshaping historical narratives to depict himself as a benevolent ruler. The term heresy is used in the accounts of Zurin Arctus of Tiber Septim's conquest because it challenges this official history, presenting in alternative accounts, such as Tiber's assassination of Culhecain, his pact with Wulfharth, and the true circumstances of Zurin's demise. Given that daggerfall confirms the Underking's existence was intertwined with the Mantella, it is considered by many as the authentic chronicle of these events. Wait, so Talos scammed himself? Well, not quite, because he was not yet himself. What do I mean by this? Let's get into how the scamming orchestrated to understand this. Tiber Septim, orchestrating an intricate plot to betray his own status as the Storm Crown, called upon the Ash King, thereby validating the long-held belief in the necessity of dismantling the tribunal. Ysmir Wulfharth possessed a formidable spirit that exceeded the capacities of an ordinary soul gem. However, Zurin Arctus had stumbled upon the ultimate receptacle, an enormous emerald gem named Mantella. Upon the Ash King's arrival, he fell victim to an ambush by the Imperial Guards. In Arctus' final moment, he unveiled the Mantella, allowing Ysmir Kingmaker's heart to bore through the battle mage's chest. The guards met their end in the ensuing devastation as well, leaving Tiber Septim as the sole survivor. Ingeniously, Arctus and Wulfharth's soul, now intertwined, fueled the Mantella, with Septim as the sole witness. He masterfully fabricated a narrative of treachery and betrayal, falsely accusing his loyal battle mage of conspiring to overthrow him. Though Ysmir Wulfharth embodied the essence of Lorkhan, he was not Lorkhan himself. Consequently, the newly empowered new medium fell short to realize the dwarf's original intention. Nonetheless, it proved formidable enough to subdue Somerset, leading to the unification of Tamriel under a single ruler. After this conquest, an enigmatic undead wizard, a decaying king of sky and storm, shattered the new medium, a narrative that may sound strangely familiar. Subsequently, the Mantella vanished into the depths of ocean as well. As documented in the Arcturian heresy, Tiber Septim declared himself an inaugural emperor of the Tamriel, reigning until he amassed unparalleled wealth. The early phases of his rule underwent substantial revisions, resulting in contradictory accounts and lingering mysteries. Questions persist as to why Alcair lays claim to Talos' birthplace when other sources point to Atmora. Also, there is the enigma of Tiber Septim's apparent transformation after his initial conquest and the mystery behind his betrayal of his loyal battle mages. The core of these mysteries, whether it centers on the heart of the battle mage or the heart of Tiber Septim, remains elusive, leaving us with no definitive answers. In came the entity known as Talos. In the realm of divine judgment, one could argue that Tiber Septim's path to godhood resembled that of Raymond Cyrodiil, his predecessor. This notion implies that Tiber Septim became a cultural hero deity of mankind, much like Raymond. Certain sources, such as cryptic Mantella rebuild letters, narrate a cataclysmic battle involving the new medium. In this tale, Tiber Septim and the enigmatic Imperial battle mage witness their shared heart being cast away from the mortal realm, thrust into the otherworldly expanse known as the Aetherius. However, this narrative raises perplexing question. Tiber Septim continued to walk the mortal plane, ushering in a new era and reigning for several decades thereafter, and not the Aetherius. Why was he not considered the living god then? What I aim to clarify, as I initially mentioned with the Holy Trinity, is an alternative perspective. In this view, Hjalti Early Beard, also known as Tiber Septim, did not achieve godhood in isolation. Instead, it was the tri-headed entity recognized as Talos who ascended to divinity. This composite being encompassed elements of Breton Hjalti, the Nord Ysmir, and Imperial Arctus. Collectively, they merged into the emerging spirits of humanity, filling the void left by Lorkhan among the divines, and consequently the pantheon expanded to 9 with the inclusion of Talos. It is conceivable that the essence of Sor intertwined with that of Auriel when Alesia introduced Arctus as the principal deity in the pantheon. However, with Talos' accent, humanity once again found a champion with Tamriel's dominant faith. This factor is fundamental reason for the strong opposition from the elven races toward Talos. Possessing the wisdom of Arctus, the heroic leadership of Tiber Septim, and the lorcanic aspect embodied by Wulfharth, Talos encompasses the attributes needed to shape a deity capable of uniting all the races of Tamriel under a single banner. But that banner did not come at just conquest. Tiber Septim used the weapon of mass destruction, the new medium, on civilian population. And the aspect of Lorcan, who is an eternal enemy to the elves, has more than one reason to reject Talos' divinity. While it remains possible that Talos was originally a single individual and that Ysmir did not bestow his iconic storm crown, or that Arctus powered the new medium independently of the Caesar, the legend of Talos is rife with inconsistencies. Therefore, here I propose the figure known as Talos or Tiber Septim was not a solitary figure but rather a complex persona with multiple facets, defying simplistic classification. Conclusion. The enigma of multifaceted Talos endures as one of the most beguiling enigmas within the Elder Scrolls tapestry. In the end though, a lot of lore surrounding the structure and basically everything that actually clarifies what it is held outside the games themselves. But that's how it goes with the Elder Scrolls lore a lot of time. The Elder Scrolls lore is a setting of metaphysics where basically anything is possible, so questioning things based on the logic of real life will get you nowhere. At the very least, we know that Arctus and Hjalti were almost definitely Talos. It is not really disputable unless you have a very bizarre interpretation of how the warp in the West really went, and thus Arctus' death allowed for the existence of Talos the deity when he was not previously present. Wulfharth and the Underking are another can of worms entirely. But that's the Elder Scrolls for you. The more you learn, the more you realize you know nothing. And as always, I hope you have gained some insight and enjoyed your time here. And if I've been unclear or inaccurate in any ways, please feel free to let me know down in the comments. Otherwise, may Talos guide you on your quest, and I'll see you on the next one.